So John took the little scroll from the angel's hand, and the feet of the angel, let's go over this one more time. You have the face shining of sun with a rainbow and clouds. So it's a moist area with a lot of sunshine, water, okay, the geographic. Now it had feet like pillars of fire. Amanita mushrooms look like little pillars of fire. They're pillars with a red cap on top, a pillar of fire. So it's where it's at and what you're looking for. Okay. The angel is a messenger. In Greek, angel or angelos is messenger, or Hermes literally was the messenger of the gods. When we speak, our words are Hermes. They're messengers from you to me, and from me to you. They're exchanges. They're little boats sent across the microcosmic ether that we exist in. Just the same as the gods on the cosmic scale exist and send messages between each other. A lot of the things that you've been told are mythologies are in actuality much more real physical interactions and processes than you've been led to believe. In fact, most of the scientists, if not all the scientists that came up with all the great inventions and discoveries that have led to modern times, pretty much believe in what I'm telling you. But it's the adulterated, power-hungry control freaks who seek to scrub out all the stuff that encourages you to think for yourself and question authority, and uses all the aspects of it that can be taken to increase their power over people. Because as I have a thesis that basically the written word is the chain that bonds man into his servitude. Until we can break free from the need to pedantically communicate everything bureaucratically through the written word so that it has to be logged and filed, we'll be forever ruled by actuaries and lawyers instead of philosophers and lovers and poets. It's the curse that we exist in this tragic comedy I call the human existence. Now, our beloved John of Patmos, when he took and he ate that sweet tasting mushroom, that amanita, that little book, that small book, that scrollicia, and he was commanded by the angel to dream visions about future kings and languages and places and things. That's a description of what happens exactly, precisely when you go into the third stage of the Amanita experience, which is a complete and total annihilation of the time-space continuum as we know it, and an elevation outside of this thing that we call reality. And thus, the rest of the Bible, or the Revelation especially, is an astro-theological treatise. The ancients understood things that the Catholic Church has been trying to keep people from knowing for years, and as of late it's been trickling out into profane formats such as the History Channel, where they still keep it dumbed down. The ape Hanuman has been through the artistic calligraphy of Thoth. He's come over and colored it in with a crayon, and that's what mankind are looking at. They're looking at this beautiful piece of calligraphy that was written by Thoth, but Hanuman, the monkey that's meant to confuse, has come over and he's marked it up with his crayons, and mankind are trying to interpret what the hell the crayon signs mean when it comes to the truth. So John, he sailed through space and time, his mind expanded, and he saw the future progression. He was able to understand basically the way the stars were going to progress, the evolution of the precession of the equinoxes, something called the Milankovitch cycles. There are 3 of them, and it actually is what controls our climate change. If you think that we only have 1 year, you're mistaken. The Buddhists have in their philosophy, if you will, something called the Mahayana and the Suhayana. I believe that's the way it's said, but the big wheel and the little wheel. That corresponds to the Mayans' big calendar, or long count, and short count calendars, because that's a reference to our short year, 1 revolution around our star in space. His name is Helios. Well, it takes about 26,000 revolutions around him for us to make 1 revolution around the mother's womb and Osiris's tomb, which is the center of the Milky Way galaxy. That's our anchor point. It takes us one year around the big count, takes 26,000 around the small. The ancients knew all of that. John was an adept in this knowledge, and the Bible and the book of Revelation is an astrotheological treaty. When he speaks in the last instance, when Christ riding the white horse returns, that literally means they're seeing auguries, because they believe that the past repeated and that you could predict the future based off the past patterns, because we're passing through the same set of influences time and time again in our cosmic wheel. So that's what John was doing. John was using his foresight, his Janus knowledge, if you will, being able to see the past and the future at once, and he wrote it in prophecy. And he said, when the stars, which the age of Aquarius is coming on us, this is the age of Christ, the age of Horus, this is what John predicted. And all the people in all the ages over the last couple thousand years that have been burned at the stake and persecuted and called Satanists and Illuminati and things today, the Illuminati is basically, that's a term people like myself back in the day who understand like deeper esoteric meaning, but modern times it's been used to mean like these global elites who want to control everybody, and I think that's offensive to the people who fought to keep this knowledge sacred. That's just a thought. So this esoteric knowledge has been kept by them. It's like a big cudgel that they wield to keep mankind in line. That's all it is. And then it's made more difficult. Mankind's lot in life is made more difficult because they displace us and they move us about, further confounding the difficulties that we have in communicating with this Hanuman-like monkey tongue that we speak instead of our true thoth-like communication, meaning we used to be able to communicate with our thoughts. Now, in the late 19th century, earliest 20th century, there was a huge amount of scientific research into this field. So the science of the soul, auric fields, you can like photograph your auric field like an X-ray. There's a process to do this. Chi energy, the Eastern philosophers and medicine in the East kept this knowledge sacred. We have acupuncture and like field lines in our body. Well, that corresponds to the ancient secret teachings of Thoth, Trismegistus, and geomancy, because they believe that the heavenly body, the earth, corresponds to our body, the macrocosm and the microcosm, the above and the below. And they understood all this because they took a plethora of different plants. The Amanita is to teach you about death, and Hermes, or Christ, is its messenger. Hermes was known as the guide, the psychopompus of the dead, because when you take Amanita muscaria, you cross the river Styx into the realm of the dead. In Egypt, Thoth would be escorting you, or Horus would escort you into the chamber outside of Osiris's judgment hall, which is, you get judged when you die. And this is a mini experience. When you go into the Amanita, like when you're being pulled into the light, if you will, everything, like your entire life, kind of starts flashing before your eyes, and you basically experience a mini judgment of yourself. You pour your soul out. You cannot help it. It's just right there. And that is that. And you come through. And if you're brave enough to make it through to the other side, it's beautiful, it's bright, and it's filled with light. And you come back after this like place where you completely lose all ego, and you come back into this world, and it's almost a sense of melancholy for a second, because you lost what it is that you know not anymore. Like it's as if once we come back into this realm, we're disconnected from it once again. Our mask has been slid back on of our ego, which is kind of like our individual soul. And that's where we get confused. We reject the fact that the ego exists and we think it's terrible. No, our ego is like our individual soul. It needs to feel real also, and identifiable and tangible. That's why we have a psychic split, is because oftentimes we don't believe anything is real, therefore we can't even believe our own soul or our ego is real, so we try to like feed it, because that's a stimuli response system. It gets stimuli and response, so that lets it know that there's cause and effect, and that makes it think it's real. When you delude your self-ego and you go into the big ego, you realize, oh, it's all good. It's all okay, cool. When you come back, you feel a greater connectedness with all other humanity. It's hard at times, though, to keep this light that is now burning inside you in. You feel compelled to speak it. You just you want people to know the wool that's been pulled over their eyes. And I believe that this is why every person that has ever came forward, like myself in the past, and has tried to speak truth to people, has been persecuted, derided, and ended up staked to a tree or hung or burned at some stake. But as John the Patmos predicted, Jesus, or the Christ, the age of the Christ is coming to return in the age of Aquarius. The knowledge of the ancient sacrament is here once again, and it cannot be stopped, because we live in the age, the land of Zion, in the new Atlantis, in America, where we have a thing called religious freedom, and we can worship however we want. This is why it's so important to protect your Constitution and the freedom of speech. We must have radical freedom of speech, limitless freedom of speech. There's no such thing as a right to be offended, especially predicated on any religious basis, because then you're overstepping other people's boundaries. So whether or not you agree with what it is they agree with, this is a free and an open marketplace of ideas, where the best idea, the truth with a capital T, will ultimately and eventually win out. If enough people get the experience and understand the truth. That's the reason why in ancient Greece, pretty much the entire city, or the entire city was Athens, the entire country, if you will, because it was not like a city-state like we think of it. It was a bunch of little towns, but they would go to the temple at Eleusis, which is dedicated to Hermes. They worshipped Hermes there. He was like the god, the messenger of the dead, and they would take the Elusinian Mysteries once a year, and they would have trance-like dances and a big party, and it was the thing where you would experience death, and you would experience taking this substance that expanded your mind in ways that you never experienced before. And then after that, you were pretty much good. You were a citizen, if you will. No one knows about this stuff in modern times. Very few people do. We've had prophets, modern prophets like Terence McKenna and people like that speak of this, but the overall notoriety is so small, because the apparatus of the Janus to control people through the manipulation of the word, i.e. their printing presses and their media censorship, has basically kept the Cyclops that is man hopelessly locked in his troglodyte-like state, dwelling inside the back of his cave, covered in his blanket of fear and anxiety, because he's only got his one eye and he's always worried about what he can't see. So, the age of Horus, the age of man, where the mother and the father come together and create us here on earth, the Christ man, the experiencer of the living God. When you take him into you, you consume Christ. So the living Christ is now living in you. You were born again. I'm a born again Christian, not a Christian, a Christian. I am a good man, referred to by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. I hope that you've taken all this in with a true, childlike mind, so that perhaps some of it would have stuck. Because if you don't approach things in life with a childlike mind, you won't ever learn anything. Again, I love you all.
Go back to the slave ships. People all in chains or what have you, they all kind of, the boom, boom. All that sorrow and that agony and what have you.